They said you can never go home again. What they didn't tell you is sometimes home holds secrets that will shatter everything you've built. The storm raged outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Caldwell Technologies' gleaming headquarters. Lightning flashed, illuminating Dexter Caldwell's imposing silhouette as he stood motionless, staring at the sprawling city 30 stories below. His gray eyes, rare and piercing, reflected both the storm outside and the one brewing within him. In his hand, he held the folder containing plans that would transform the sleepy hometown he'd left behind 15 years ago. A hometown that held nothing but bittersweet memories and one spectacular failure he'd buried beneath billions in success. For a moment, just a heartbeat, his mind betrayed him. The thunder crashed, and suddenly he wasn't seeing skyscrapers but her face. Imani. The soft curve of her smile, the warmth of her brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, the feeling of her lips against his in that summer garden before ambition had consumed him. "The board is waiting, sir." His assistant's voice shattered the memory. Dexter straightened his custom suit jacket, the armor he wore daily. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. What would you sacrifice for a second chance at the love you abandoned for success? And what happens when that love comes with a responsibility you never knew existed?" Hello once again, my beautiful Love Diaries family. Draw closer to our virtual fireplace as we prepare to embark on another journey through the labyrinth of hearts colliding, healing, and finding their way back to each other against all odds. This sanctuary we've built together has become a place where stories of transformation heal wounds we sometimes don't even realize we carry. Each week, your comments remind me that across oceans and continents, we're connected by the universal language of the heart. I'm curious, where in this beautiful world are you watching from today? Whether you're in a bustling city like our protagonist or a quiet town like the one he returns to, drop your location in the comments below. Your stories and connections remind us why we gather here day after day. Today's journey speaks to the question that has echoed in countless hearts: what happens when success feels hollow? When the empire you've built can't fill the emptiness inside? When the road not taken suddenly reappears before you, with complications you never imagined? Wealth and power might build impressive walls, but as we'll discover together, it takes far more courage to tear them down and embrace vulnerability. So settle in, dear friends, as we witness the collision of past and present, of success and sacrifice, of the family lost and the one unexpectedly found. We need to move quickly on Riverdale. Octavia Mercer's sharp voice cut through the boardroom tension as she advanced to the next slide in her presentation. The properties are undervalued, the local economy is desperate for investment, and frankly, they'll welcome whatever we propose. Dexter's attention snapped back to the present. Riverdale. His hometown. The place he'd clawed his way out of with nothing but determination and Imani's unwavering belief in him. Before he'd left them both behind. Not so fast, Octavia. Dexter stood, commanding the room's attention instantly. This isn't just another acquisition. Riverdale may be struggling, but it has character, history. Character and history don't generate returns for shareholders, Octavia countered, her ambition radiating from every perfectly tailored inch of her pantsuit. Your sentimental attachment is noted, but my knowledge of the community is an asset, Dexter corrected her. I'll personally oversee this project. We'll host a town hall next week. I want to hear directly from residents before finalizing plans. Terrence Cooper, his right-hand man for the past decade, raised an eyebrow but said nothing until the boardroom had emptied. Riverdale? Terrence leaned against the polished table. You haven't set foot there since you left for college. What's really going on, Dex? Dexter scrolled through his phone, avoiding his friend's perceptive gaze. It's time. If we're transforming the place, I should at least look it in the eye while doing it. Later that night, sleep eluded him as it often did. In his penthouse overlooking the city, Dexter poured himself a drink and opened his laptop. Without conscious decision, his fingers typed a name that hadn't left a corner of his mind in 15 years. Imani Sinclair. His breath caught as her image appeared on screen. Still beautiful. More so, perhaps, with the gentle maturity that softened her features. A pediatric nurse now, according to the hospital website. The career she'd wanted before she'd set it aside to support his dreams. The article mentioned her volunteer work at the community center. Nothing about a husband. Just a brief quote about her dedication to Riverdale's children. The children. Miles away, in a modest but welcoming home filled with framed drawings and science fair ribbons, Imani Sinclair moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Pancakes sizzled on the griddle as she called up the stairs. Micah. Maya. 5 minutes or you'll miss the bus. The thundering of small feet heralded the arrival of her world, her 10-year-old twins who burst into the kitchen with boundless energy. Maya's curls bounced as she slid into her chair, while Micah's serious expression mirrored his mother's when concentrating. Mom, can you sign my permission slip? Maya pushed a crumpled paper across the counter. We're going to the Science Museum on Friday. Imani poured orange juice while scanning the form. Of course, sweetheart. Do you think Dad would have liked science museums? The innocent question from Micah sent a jolt through Imani's system. His rare gray eyes, so like his father's, watched her with that penetrating gaze that sometimes took her breath away. I think he would have loved them, she answered carefully, the same way she always did when they asked about their father. Not a lie, but not the whole truth. The twins had stopped asking why he wasn't in their lives years ago, accepting her explanation that sometimes grown-ups made difficult choices. They didn't know their father had no idea they existed. That when Dexter had chosen his career over their marriage, walking away to build his empire, she discovered her pregnancy 2 weeks later and made her own choice, to let him go completely rather than be an obligation he resented. Lucy's coming over tonight, right? Maya asked, changing the subject as she often did when her brother brought up their father. Yes, and she's bringing that chocolate cake you love. After the twins left for school, Imani savored her cooling coffee and unfolded the local newspaper. The headline made her choke mid-sip. Caldwell Technologies announces major development project in Riverdale. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in perfect synchronicity with her composure. There, staring back at her from the page, was Dexter Caldwell. 15 years older, infinitely more powerful, but with the same intense eyes that had once looked at her as if she were his entire world. The eyes her son had inherited. Dexter was coming home. And her carefully constructed life was about to implode. Have you ever had that moment when your past suddenly crashes into your present? Share in the comments a time when you had to face someone or something you thought was behind you. The community center hummed with anxious energy. Imani stood at the back, pulse racing as residents filled every available seat. Lucy Parker, her best friend and fiercest protector since childhood, squeezed her arm. You don't have to speak, Lucy whispered. No one would blame you if you walked out right now. Imani shook her head. This isn't about me and Dexter. This is about protecting our community from corporate bulldozers. But when the doors opened and Dexter Caldwell strode in, flanked by his executive team, it became abundantly clear this was very much about them. 15 years dissolved in an instant as their eyes locked across the crowded room. He faltered, almost imperceptibly to anyone who didn't know him as she once had. A slight stumble, quickly recovered. The carefully constructed mask of corporate confidence slipped for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. Imani felt Lucy's questioning gaze but couldn't look away from Dexter. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move as memories flooded back with devastating clarity. Mayor Jenkins welcomed the Caldwell Technologies team, introducing Dexter with glowing praise about the hometown boy who'd made good. When Dexter took the podium, his deep voice resonated through the room, but his eyes kept finding hers despite his evident effort to look elsewhere. Riverdale gave me my start, he said, his practiced charm temporarily faltering when Imani shifted position. I believe in giving back, in development that preserves what makes this community special while creating new opportunities. The words were perfect. Too perfect. Corporate polish covering what she knew was a ruthlessly efficient approach to business. The Dexter she'd loved had disappeared into this stranger in an expensive suit. When the floor opened for questions, Imani found herself walking to the microphone before she could reconsider. A mess. Sinclair, Mayor Jenkins nodded, unaware of the history crackling between them like live wires about to spark. Imani looked directly at Dexter, refusing to let her voice waver. You speak about preserving what makes Riverdale special, yet your company's previous developments have displaced long-term residents and small businesses in favor of luxury condos and high-end retail. What specific protections are you offering to prevent that happening here? A flash of something, recognition, respect, perhaps regret, crossed Dexter's features. For a heartbeat, she saw the man she'd once known. An excellent question, he recovered smoothly. In fact, I'd like to form a community advisory committee to ensure local voices directly influence our plans. I hope you'll consider joining us, Ms. Sinclair, given your evident passion for Riverdale. The room buzzed with approval. A masterful corporate move. But the way he said her name, the slight emphasis only she would notice, told her this was personal. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Imani felt a presence behind her. The familiar scent of his cologne, different brand but same notes, wrapped around her before she turned. Imani. Just her name. Nothing more. She faced him, painfully aware of Lucy hovering protectively nearby. Dexter. 15 years and not so much as a phone call, and now you want to bulldoze our hometown? That's not. He stopped, visibly recalibrating from corporate mode to something more authentic. It's good to see you. Is it? Her voice remained steady despite the earthquake in her chest. Because from where I stand, this feels like you finally coming back to destroy what you left behind. Thunder crashed outside, as if the heavens themselves acknowledged the storm between them. Before he could respond, the community center lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, someone brushed against her arm. Dexter, she knew instantly from the electric current that shot through her body. For 15 years, she'd convinced herself that feeling had died. She was wrong. Everyone stay calm, Isaac Winter's steady voice rose above the murmurs. The elderly man who'd mentored them both as teenagers took charge. Generator should kick in shortly. Meanwhile, we have emergency supplies in the back room. Need some strong arms to help distribute them. I'll help, Dexter's voice came from beside her. Me too, Imani added, already regretting the decision but unwilling to appear affected by his presence. In the back storage room, lit only by emergency lights, they worked in tense silence, passing out flashlights and bottled water. When their fingers brushed passing a box of candles, both pulled back as if burned. Your daughter, Dexter said suddenly. Earlier, at the refreshment table. She looks like you. Imani froze. He'd seen Maya but hadn't made the connection. Not yet. Thank you, she managed, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. You have a beautiful family, he continued, his voice carefully neutral. Your husband must be proud. I'm not married. The words escaped before she could consider their impact. Never have been. Not since. Me. He finished quietly. I didn't know you had children. There's a lot you don't know, Dexter. She turned away, unable to bear the weight of half-truths any longer. A lot you chose not to know when you walked away. The generator hummed to life, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. The moment of vulnerability shattered. Dexter's corporate mask slid back into place, but his eyes, those penetrating gray eyes that haunted her dreams and looked back at her from her son's face every day, held questions she wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Chapter 2. Days after the town hall meeting, the Community Advisory Committee convened in the renovated library. Imani arrived early, steeling herself for another encounter with Dexter. The previous night, she'd sat on the edge of Maya's bed, studying her daughter's features, Dexter's cheekbones, his determined chin softened by youth, and wondered how much longer she could keep the secret. "You're doing the right thing," Lucy had insisted over wine after the twins were asleep. "He abandoned you to build his empire. Why should he get to waltz back now and play daddy when it's convenient?" But was it right? The question haunted her as she arranged her notes on the conference table. "You always were first to arrive," Dexter's voice came from the doorway, startling her. "Some things never change." He looked different today, less corporate armor, more like the man she'd once known. Jeans instead of tailored pants, a simple button-down with rolled sleeves revealing forearms that still bore the small scar from when they'd climbed Old Man Peterson's fence to steal apples at 16. "Some things do," she countered, gesturing to the empty room. "Here we are, deciding the fate of Riverdale, when once we couldn't wait to escape it." Dexter placed his leather portfolio on the table, careful to maintain distance between them. "Did you escape it, I mean?" The question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity that caught her off guard. "I tried," she admitted. "Started medical school like we planned. But then..." She stopped, the words, "I got pregnant," hovering dangerously close to her lips. Life took a different turn. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He nodded, something like regret flickering across his features. "Riverdale suits you. Always did. And New York suits you," she replied. "You've certainly accomplished everything you set out to do." "Not everything." His gray eyes held hers for a beat too long before other committee members began filing in. The meeting proceeded with professional courtesy, but every time Dexter spoke about preserving historical buildings or creating affordable housing alongside luxury units, Imani felt disoriented. These were their old dreams, the ones they'd whispered about late at night, imagining how they might someday transform their hometown if they ever made enough money. Had he remembered, or was this calculated public relations? When Dexter proposed renovating the community center rather than replacing it, adding a state-of-the-art medical clinic that would partner with the hospital where Imani worked, she couldn't maintain her suspicion. "That's actually a wonderful idea," she conceded. "I had a good teacher in what communities really need," he replied quietly, a private message in a public forum. After the meeting adjourned, Dexter caught up with her in the parking lot. "Would you consider showing me around tomorrow? I'd like to see Riverdale through your eyes before finalizing these plans." Every instinct warned against spending time alone with him, yet she heard herself saying, "The twins have a field trip. I'm off work. Meet me at Harlow's Diner at 9. That night, she dreamed of the day he left, his promises to return for her once he'd established himself, the heartbreak when his calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether as his star rose. The pregnancy test 2 weeks later that changed everything. She woke with tear-stained cheeks and the weight of 15 years of silence. Harlow's Diner hadn't changed in decades. The same red vinyl booths, the same cracked counter where they'd once shared milkshakes as teenagers. When Imani walked in, Dexter was already there, tucked into their old corner booth, 2 coffees waiting. "You remembered how I take it," she said, sliding in across from him. "Black with 1 sugar." He shrugged as if remembering her coffee preference after 15 years was nothing. "Some details stick with you." They toured Riverdale together, the struggling Main Street shops, the park where they'd first kissed, the riverside path now overgrown but still beautiful. At each stop, memories ambushed them, some spoken aloud, others silently acknowledged in glances that lingered too long. "You never asked why I stopped calling," Dexter said suddenly as they stood on the old footbridge spanning Miller Creek. Imani gripped the railing, watching the water flow beneath them. "Would it have changed anything if I had? Maybe not then. But I need you to know I didn't just forget about us." His voice held none of the corporate smoothness, only raw honesty. "When my mother died suddenly, I buried myself in work. The more successful I became, the more I convinced myself you were better off without me. That I was too broken, too driven to be what you deserved. That wasn't your choice to make, she said softly, the anger she'd nursed for years tempering into something more complex. We could have faced it together. I know that now. He turned to her, vulnerability evident in his usually guarded expression. Success feels hollow when there's no one who knew you before you had it. From anyone else, the words might have sounded like a line. From Dexter, with his carefully constructed walls momentarily down, they struck her heart with unexpected force. They continued walking, the conversation shifting to safer topics, the twins' activities, his philanthropic projects that never made headlines, the community center renovation he seemed genuinely invested in. When her phone rang, the school nurse reporting Maya had a fever, Dexter insisted on driving her to pick up her daughter. And when Maya climbed into the back seat, pale-faced and miserable, Imani watched in the rearview mirror as Dexter engaged her with gentle questions about her favorite subjects, making her smile despite feeling ill. Thank you, Imani said when he pulled into her driveway. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. His gaze shifted to Maya in the back seat, then back to Imani. She has your smile. That night, after tucking Maya in with medicine and a cool compress, Imani sat on her porch swing, the weight of her secret becoming unbearable. Dexter had been kind, attentive, nothing like the corporate shark she'd prepared herself to hate. The man she'd glimpsed today was the one she'd fallen in love with, older, certainly changed, but with the same core of decency she'd always seen in him. The following days brought unexpected developments. Dexter appeared at the community center with architects and contractors, personally overseeing plans for the renovation. He donated new equipment to the children's ward where Imani worked. When Octavia Mercer pushed for more luxury elements and fewer affordable units, witnesses reported heated arguments between her and Dexter in which he refused to compromise on community benefits. He's playing some angle, Lucy insisted during their weekly dinner. Men like him always are. But Isaac Winters, who joined them for dessert, shook his head. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Success might have complicated him, but it didn't change his heart. His heart isn't the issue, Imani replied, cutting her pie into precise pieces she didn't eat. The past is the past. We've all moved on. Have we? Isaac's knowing eyes held hers. Sometimes what looks like moving on is just running in place, child. 2 days later, the community center burst into chaos when a summer storm knocked out power throughout Riverdale. With the hospital generator handling only essential services, non-emergency patients and visitors were evacuated to the center. Imani arrived in scrubs, having volunteered to help monitor elderly patients temporarily relocated from the hospital's rehabilitation wing. She was checking Mrs. Gallagher's blood pressure when Dexter appeared, soaked from the rain, sleeves rolled up, already organizing volunteers. The delivery trucks can't get through because of downed trees, he was saying. We need to distribute the supplies we have carefully. For hours, they worked side by side in the dim emergency lighting, moving through the crowded space with synchronicity that felt both foreign and familiar. When an elderly man became distressed about his missing medication, Dexter calmed him with the same patience he'd once shown Imani's nervous father before asking him to marry his daughter. As midnight approached, the rain continued unabated, thunder occasionally shaking the old building's foundations. In a quiet moment, they found themselves alone in the kitchen, making sandwiches by candlelight for the volunteers. You're good at this, Imani observed, watching him efficiently assemble meals. Crisis management. Running a company is constant crisis management. He smiled tiredly. Though usually with fewer soggy volunteers and more expensive suits. Yet here you are, making peanut butter sandwiches in a storm. She handed him another loaf of bread. The twins love when I cut the crusts off. Have it now. They seem like amazing kids, he said carefully. The girl, Maya, reminds me of you. Same determined look when she's thinking. Imani's knife stilled. And Micah has his own wonderful qualities. Lightning flashed, illuminating the kitchen in stark white light. In that fraction of a second, she saw Dexter's expression change as he processed her words, the careful way she'd deflected. The building plunged back into semi-darkness, but the question in his eyes remained visible. Before he could voice it, Isaac appeared in the doorway. "Dexter, my boy, there's a leak in the east wing. Could use those engineering skills of yours." The moment passed, but Imani felt the shift between them, questions forming that she wouldn't be able to evade much longer. "Have you ever noticed how storms have a way of washing away our pretenses? Tell me about a time when unexpected circumstances revealed something you'd been trying to hide or ignore." 3 days later, Imani received a text from Dexter asking to continue their tour of Riverdale at the weekend, specifically requesting she show him the improvements needed at the local playground. An odd request that made sense only when she arrived with the twins in tow, having promised them ice cream afterward. Micah and Maya raced ahead to the swings while Imani and Dexter walked behind. The tension between them had transformed into something expectant, as if both were waiting for the inevitable collision of truth. "They have so much energy," Dexter commented, watching the children. "Were you the same at that age?" "According to my mother, I was worse." She smiled. "Always climbing things I shouldn't, asking questions no one wanted to answer." "That never changed," he said softly. "It was one of the things I loved most about you." The past tense hung between them, a lie neither acknowledged. Whatever remained between them didn't belong in the past, it lived and breathed in the present, uncomfortable and insistent. "Micah! Don't go so high," Imani called as her son pumped his legs vigorously on the swing. Dexter stilled beside her, his attention suddenly laser-focused on the boy. Micah had removed his baseball cap, his dark hair catching the sunlight, his profile in motion showing the same determined chin Dexter saw in the mirror each morning. "How old are they?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. 10. 10, he repeated, the simple number landing between them with the weight of a revelation. His quick mind did the calculation she knew he would. 10 years. Plus 9 months of pregnancy. 11 years since they'd last been together. The timing that couldn't be coincidental. Maya. Micah's voice rang out across the playground. "Watch this." He jumped from the swing at its highest point, landing with the natural grace of youth, his gray eyes, Dexter's eyes, bright with accomplishment as he looked toward them. Dexter's sharp intake of breath was audible. Imani watched as realization dawned across his features, shock, disbelief, then something deeper and more complex. He turned to her, questions burning in eyes that matched her son's exactly. Imani. Just her name, but it contained volumes. Accusation. Confusion. A demand for truth. "Not here," she whispered, nodding toward the oblivious children. "Not now." "Then when?" The control in his voice betrayed the effort it cost him. "When were you planning to tell me I have children?" The word, children, plural, told her he'd made the connection to Maya as well. Of course he had. He'd always been brilliantly perceptive. "Tonight," she said, the decision made in that moment. "After they're asleep. The garden behind my house. 8 o'clock. He nodded once, rigid with contained emotion, then turned and walked away without another word. Imani watched him go, the weight of 15 years of secrets suddenly unbearable. The old garden gate creaked just as it had when they were teenagers sneaking moments alone. Dexter appeared exactly at 8, moonlight silvering his dark hair, his expression unreadable as he approached where she waited on the stone bench. This garden had witnessed their first kiss, their whispered dreams, their tearful goodbye when he left for New York. Now it would hold the confrontation she'd both dreaded and, somewhere deep inside, longed for. Why? The single word contained a universe of hurt. Imani had prepared explanations, justifications, defenses. They all evaporated under the raw pain in his eyes. "You were gone," she said simply. "Building your empire. I found out 2 weeks after you stopped calling. What was I supposed to do? Become the obligation that held you back? The small-town girl who trapped the rising star with a pregnancy? You should have told me." Thunder rumbled in the distance, nature providing soundtrack to their confrontation. "They're my children, Imani. 10 years. You kept them from me for 10 years. You left us first." The pain she'd buried for a decade crystallized into anger. "You chose your ambition over our marriage. Over me." The calls became emails, then texts, then nothing. "You disappeared into your success while I was throwing up every morning, terrified and alone. I never knew." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it ached. "How could I make a choice about children I didn't know existed? Would it have changed anything?" she challenged. "Would you have walked away from everything you were building?" The great Dexter Caldwell, giving up his dreams to change diapers in a small town he couldn't wait to escape? "You didn't give me the chance to find out." His voice dropped, controlled fury giving way to something more devastating, grief. 10 years of first steps, first words, first days of school. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Gone. I can never get those back. The truth of it hit her with physical force. Whatever her reasons, justified or not, she had denied not just Dexter but her children the connection they might have had. "I thought I was protecting them," she whispered. "From being disappointed when you couldn't make it to school plays because of board meetings. From feeling like afterthoughts in your important life. Like you felt." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You thought I'd do to them what I did to you." The garden filled with the fragrance of night jasmine, the same scent that had surrounded them the night they'd first surrendered to each other as teenagers. The same flowers that had bloomed the night he'd proposed. Nature's reminder of what once was, and what might have been. "You have to understand," she said, her voice breaking. "When I found out I was pregnant, I called you for 3 days straight. Your assistant kept saying you were in meetings. I finally got through and you told me you'd call back. You never did." Dexter's face paled in the moonlight. The Singapore merger. 3 days of round-the-clock negotiations. He closed his eyes briefly. "I remember promising to call you back. Then the deal nearly collapsed. By the time I came up for air, weeks had passed, and I convinced myself you were better off without me. And I convinced myself my children were better off without a father who would always put them last," she admitted. "Maybe we were both wrong." Lightning illuminated the garden, catching on the tears now falling freely down her cheeks. When Dexter moved toward her, she didn't resist. His fingers brushed the moisture from her face, the simple touch igniting the connection that had never truly died. "They're extraordinary," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Our children. I saw it even before I knew." "They are," she agreed. "Maya has your mind for numbers. And Micah has my eyes." He finished, wonder breaking through the pain. "I have children, Imani. We have children." The storm finally broke overhead, rain beginning to fall in earnest. Neither moved to seek shelter as the water soaked through their clothes, washing away years of misunderstanding in its cleansing downpour. "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly aware of his proximity, of his hand still cradling her face. "Now," he said, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second, "we find a way forward. For them. And maybe." He didn't finish the thought, but his meaning hung in the rain-filled air between them. The storm raged around them as 15 years of separation collapsed into a single moment of truth. When Dexter's lips finally met hers, the contact was both familiar and entirely new, a homecoming and an exploration. The kiss deepened with a decade of longing neither had fully acknowledged until this moment. They broke apart, breathless and shaken by the force of what still existed between them. "This doesn't fix everything," Imani whispered against his chest as he held her. "No," he agreed, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear. "But it's a start." Chapter 3. The following days unfolded in a delicate dance of rediscovery and caution. Dexter extended his stay in Riverdale indefinitely, moving from the hotel to a lakeside property he purchased without hesitation, close enough to be present, distant enough to give the family space to adjust. Telling the twins had been both simpler and more complex than either parent anticipated. Wide-eyed shock had given way to Micah's careful questions and Maya's emotional outburst. "You were here the whole time and didn't tell us," she had demanded, tears streaming down her face as she looked between her parents. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Dexter had admitted, kneeling to her level rather than towering above. "Very big mistakes. I would have been here if I'd known about you. Both of you. Are you staying now?" Micah asked, his gray eyes, Dexter's eyes, missing nothing. "I'm not going anywhere," Dexter promised, the words a vow that resonated beyond the moment. Now, 3 weeks later, he sat on the wooden dock behind his new home, watching Micah cast a fishing line into the still waters of the lake. The boy had his mother's focus and patience, qualities Dexter had once loved in Imani and now recognized in their son. "Mom says you build things," Micah said, breaking the companionable silence. "Companies, mostly," Dexter replied. "Buildings sometimes. Could you build a treehouse?" The question came with attempted casualness that didn't quite mask the hope underneath. Something tightened in Dexter's chest. Such a simple request, yet it represented everything he'd missed, the ordinary moments of fatherhood sacrificed on the altar of ambition. "I could," he answered, his voice rougher than intended. "In fact, I built one with my father when I was about your age." Before he left. Micah glanced at him, the perceptive gaze unsettling in its familiarity. "Did you miss him? When he was gone?" The question pierced straight through his carefully constructed armor. "Every day," Dexter admitted, the truth he rarely acknowledged aloud. "I promised myself I'd never do that to my own children." Irony twisted his mouth. "Life has a way of making you face your own broken promises." "But you didn't know about us," Micah said with the simple logic of childhood. "Mom explained." Dexter nodded, wondering at the resilience of children, their capacity for forgiveness that adults so often lost. "Still. I should have been there." "You're here now," Micah shrugged, then brightened. "We should start on the treehouse tomorrow. Maya will want to help too, she pretends she doesn't like building stuff, but she does." "Tomorrow it is," Dexter agreed, feeling something fragile take root in his chest, the beginning of fatherhood, a decade delayed. Across town, Imani stood in her kitchen with Lucy, who watched her with undisguised concern. "You're just letting him into their lives, just like that?" Lucy demanded, protective as always. "After everything?" "They're his children," Imani replied, mechanically chopping vegetables for dinner. "They've wanted to know their father their entire lives." "And what about you?" Lucy pressed. "I saw how you looked at him at the community center fundraiser. Don't tell me those feelings aren't complicating things." Imani's knife stilled. The fundraiser had been a revelation, Dexter in his element but changed, directing his considerable charisma and influence toward the community's needs rather than corporate advancement. Throughout the evening, she'd caught him watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the distance between them. "It's complicated," she admitted. "We have history. And chemistry that nearly set the room on fire," Lucy interjected dryly. "Meanwhile, Tyler's been calling you for days." Tyler Baldwin. The investment banker she'd been dating casually before Dexter's return had been relegated to the periphery of her thoughts. "I need to talk to him," Imani sighed. "It's not fair to keep him hanging when When you're still in love with your ex-husband? Lucy supplied gently. I didn't say that. But she didn't deny it either. That night, after the twins were asleep, Imani's phone buzzed with a text from Dexter. Micah asked me to build a treehouse. Starting tomorrow. If that's okay with you. She smiled at the careful respect for her parental authority, so different from the take-charge CEO the world knew. He's been wanting one forever. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. Finally, I miss you. 2 simple words that unleashed a flood of emotion. Before she could respond, another message came through. I know we're taking things slow for the kids. Respecting boundaries, but I can't stop thinking about you. About us. That night in the rain. Imani's fingers hovered over the screen, her heart racing. The sensible response would be to maintain distance, to focus solely on co-parenting. But the truth burned through her hesitation. I miss you too. The following Saturday found them all at Dexter's lake house, the beginnings of a treehouse taking shape in the massive oak that dominated the back lawn. Maya had overcome her initial reluctance and now directed operations from the ground, clipboard in hand, while Micah handed tools up to Dexter on the platform. Imani watched from the porch, something warm and dangerous unfurling in her chest at the sight of her children with their father. Dexter had discarded his shirt in the summer heat, and she couldn't help noticing the lean strength of his shoulders as he worked, the focus in his expression so like Micah's. He's good with them, Isaac Winters commented, joining her with lemonade. The elderly man had stopped by to deliver building plans he'd found in his attic. The very treehouse design he and Dexter's father had used decades ago. He is, she agreed. Almost like he's been doing it forever. Some things come naturally when they're meant to be. Isaac's knowing gaze settled on her. Just like some feelings never truly die, no matter how deep we bury them. Before she could respond, commotion erupted from the tree. Maya screamed as Micah teetered on the edge of the platform, momentarily losing his balance. In one fluid movement, Dexter's arm shot out, catching their son and pulling him to safety. Imani was halfway across the lawn before she registered moving, heart in her throat. When she reached them, Dexter had already climbed down with Micah, checking him for injuries while Maya hovered anxiously. I'm fine, Mom, Micah insisted, embarrassed by the attention. Dad caught me. Dad. The word hung in the air, the first time either child had used it. Dexter's eyes met Imani's over their son's head, raw emotion evident in his expression. Later, after the children had gone swimming with Isaac supervising, Dexter and Imani found themselves alone in his kitchen, preparing lunch. Thank you, she said softly. For catching him. I'll always catch them, he replied, the promise encompassing far more than physical safety. Both of them. The air between them thickened with unspoken feelings. She became acutely aware of his proximity as they moved around the kitchen, the brush of his arm against hers sending electricity through her body. Imani. Her name on his lips was both question and statement. Where do we stand? You and me? The directness was so like him, the man who built empires didn't waste time with ambiguity. I don't know, she admitted. It's all happening so fast. The children adore you already. And I. You what? He prompted when she hesitated. I never stopped loving you, she confessed, the truth finally breaking free. I tried. For years, I tried to hate you, to forget you. But seeing you with them, seeing the man you've become. Dexter moved closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek with a gentleness that belied his strength. I never deserved you, he murmured. Not then. Maybe not now. But I swear to you, I'm not the same man who walked away. Prove it, she whispered, a challenge and an invitation. His lips met hers with restrained passion, the kiss deepening as she responded, years of separation dissolving in the heat between them. When they broke apart, breathless, the sound of children's laughter from outside reminded them of responsibilities beyond this moment. "I intend to," he promised. "Every day." But proving his commitment would require more than words and kisses. The following week brought the confrontation Imani had feared. "Mr. Caldwell, this development plan is commercial suicide," Octavia Mercer's voice carried through the conference room door left slightly ajar. "The board won't accept these modifications." Affordable housing? A medical center charging sliding scale fees? You're sacrificing millions in potential profit. "The board will accept what I tell them to accept," Dexter's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "This isn't just about profit, Octavia. It's about building something that matters." "This is about her, isn't it?" Octavia's accusation crackled with frustration. "Your ex-wife has you throwing away shareholder value for some misguided attempt at redemption." "Careful," Dexter's warning was soft but unmistakable. "My personal life is not up for discussion." "It is when it affects the company," Octavia countered. "You haven't been to headquarters in weeks. You've delegated major decisions to Terrence. And now this revised plan that cuts our returns in half." "The revised plan creates sustainable development this community can embrace rather than resist," Dexter corrected. "And it establishes a model we can replicate in other markets. Think beyond next quarter's earnings report, Octavia." Imani stepped back from the door, processing what she'd heard. The confrontation confirmed what she'd begun to suspect: Dexter truly was transforming, prioritizing community impact over maximum profit. That evening, as they walked along the riverfront after a family dinner, the twins running ahead to feed ducks, Dexter told her about the board meeting scheduled for the following day. "Octavia's gathered support to challenge the revised plans," he explained. "I fly to New York tonight. Should be back tomorrow evening." The familiar words, a business trip, a promise to return quickly, sent a chill through Imani despite the summer warmth. How many such promises had preceded his final disappearance from her life? "You'll be back?" she couldn't help asking, hating the vulnerability in her voice. Dexter stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Look at me," he said softly. "I'm not that man anymore. Nothing, no company, no deal, no amount of money, is worth losing you again. Losing them." The great Dexter Caldwell, putting family before business, she teased, trying to lighten the moment despite her fear. The business world might collapse in shock. "Let it," he said simply. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, "Come with me." "What?" "You and the twins. Come to New York. Let me show you that part of my life. Let me show the board what I'm fighting for." The request stunned her. "The children have summer camp, and I have shifts at the hospital. One day," he pressed. "Just one day to help me bridge these two worlds." Looking into his eyes, the eyes she saw each morning in her son's face, Imani made her decision. The Caldwell Technologies boardroom fell silent as Dexter entered with Imani and the twins. Octavia Mercer's expression shifted from surprise to calculation, while Terrence Cooper failed to hide his grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dexter addressed the assembled board members with quiet authority. "Before we vote on the Riverdale development, I'd like to introduce you to Imani Sinclair, Community Liaison for the project." His eyes softened as he continued, "And these are our children, Micah and Maya." The collective intake of breath around the table was audible. In one simple introduction, he had announced his newfound family to the corporate world that knew him only as a driven bachelor. "Our children?" Octavia recovered first, her gaze darting between the twins and Dexter with dawning comprehension. "Yes," Dexter confirmed, his hand finding Imani's. "Which is partly why Riverdale matters so deeply to me. But it's more than personal. The revised development plan represents the future of Caldwell Technologies, sustainable, community-focused growth that generates reasonable profits while creating genuine value." As the meeting progressed, Imani watched with growing admiration as Dexter presented his vision with passion and precision. This was the man she'd always known he could be, brilliant and ambitious, yes, but guided by principles stronger than profit margins. When the vote came down decisively in favor of the revised plan, she wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was Dexter's next announcement. "One more item," he said as the meeting concluded. "I'm restructuring my role effective immediately. I'll continue as CEO but will be primarily based in Riverdale moving forward, with Terrence handling day-to-day operations here in New York." Octavia's pen clattered against the table. "You can't be serious." "Completely," Dexter replied calmly. "Modern technology makes it entirely feasible to run this company without being physically present in this building every day. And some things," his gaze found his children, who were exploring the boardroom with curious eyes, "are worth restructuring an entire life for." That night, in the privacy of his Manhattan penthouse while the twins slept in the guest room, Imani stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. "You're really doing this," she said wonderingly. "Walking away from all this?" Dexter moved behind her, arms encircling her waist as they both gazed at the skyline. "Not walking away," he corrected. "Bringing it with me, just differently. The penthouse, the company, they'll still be here. But my life, my home, will be with you. If you'll have me." She turned in his arms, searching his face for any hesitation and finding none. "After everything, all the years, all the hurt, you'd give up this lifestyle for a small-town existence?" "I'm not giving up anything that matters," he said simply. "I'm finally claiming what does." The kiss that followed was a promise, deeper and more binding than any corporate contract. As it intensified, their bodies remembered each other with startling clarity. The curves that fit perfectly against strength, the texture of skin against skin, the rhythm they'd once perfected together. When they broke apart, breathless, Dexter rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "Just to sleep, to be close. The children are just down the hall." The intimacy of the request, so much more than physical desire, moved her deeply. "Yes," she replied, understanding this was about healing, about rebuilding trust through the simple act of vulnerability. 3 weeks later, Imani stood in the garden behind her home, their home now, as Dexter had moved in at the twins' insistence, watching as construction crews put finishing touches on the community center renovation. The medical clinic wing where she would soon work part-time gleamed in the late summer sunshine. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dexter's voice came from behind her as his arms slipped around her waist, a gesture that had become beautifully familiar. "Just thinking about how much has changed," she said, leaning back against his solid warmth. "The center, the children, us." He murmured against her hair. "Speaking of change, I have something to show you." He led her through the garden gate and down the familiar path to the old stone bench where they'd confronted the truth in the rain weeks earlier. But the bench was gone, replaced by an elegant wrought iron gazebo draped with the night-blooming jasmine that had witnessed their first teenage love. "Dexter," she breathed, taking in the transformation. "It's beautiful. This garden has held our most important moments," he said quietly. "I thought it deserved to be honored." Inside the gazebo, a small velvet box waited on the central table. Imani's heart stuttered in her chest as Dexter picked it up. "I'm not asking yet," he clarified, opening the box to reveal not a ring but a delicate locket. "I know we still have healing to do, trust to rebuild. But I wanted you to have this." The gold locket opened to reveal tiny pictures of the twins on one side and an old photo of Imani and Dexter as teenagers on the other, the beginning and what could be their future, connected in precious metal. "To remember that some circles are meant to close," he said, fastening it around her neck. "Some stories are meant to continue, even after detours." Imani touched the locket, emotion making speech impossible for a moment. When she found her voice, she asked the question that had lingered despite everything. "How can you forgive me so easily? For keeping them from you for so long?" "Not easily," he admitted, his honesty one of the qualities she'd always loved. But completely. We both made choices that hurt each other. The difference is that now we're choosing each other, choosing our family, with open eyes." As the evening deepened around them, the jasmine released its intoxicating scent into the air. In this garden where they had first discovered love, lost it, and found it again transformed, Dexter and Imani sealed their reconciliation with a kiss that tasted of forgiveness and promise. Lightning flashed in the distance, not a threat this time but nature's acknowledgement of the electricity still vibrant between them after all these years. When rain began to fall in gentle summer drops, neither moved to seek shelter, remembering another storm that had washed away pretense and revealed truth. "I love you," Dexter whispered against her lips, the words simple but carrying the weight of years, of lessons learned, of a man who had discovered that true success wasn't measured in buildings or billions. "I love you too," Imani answered, her heart finally unguarded. "I always have." The rain fell harder, but they remained in each other's arms, protected by the gazebo he had built, a symbol of the shelter they had found in each other once again. When have you experienced a moment of perfect clarity about what truly matters in life? Share your story of rediscovering priorities or second chances in the comments below. 2 months later, the entire town gathered for the grand opening of the renovated community center. Dexter stood slightly behind Imani as she cut the ribbon, their children flanking them with matching excited grins. The Sinclair Caldwell Community Center is officially open. Mayor Jenkins announced to cheers and applause. As community members flooded into the new facility, Terrence Cooper approached with a rare smile. "Almost didn't recognize you without a suit," he teased Dexter, who was dressed casually in jeans and a button-down. "Fatherhood looks good on you." "Feels even better," Dexter replied, watching as Micah eagerly showed his friends the new computer lab he'd helped design. In the medical center wing, Imani guided elderly residents through the services that would now be available in their own community. Her face glowed with purpose and joy, the passionate advocate he'd fallen in love with, now empowered with resources to make real change. Lucy Parker appeared at Dexter's elbow, her initial suspicion softened into cautious acceptance. "Don't think I'm not still watching you," she warned, though the bite had left her tone. "But I have to admit, you've surprised me." "In good ways, I hope," he replied. "She's happy," Lucy nodded toward Imani. "Truly happy, in a way I haven't seen since before you left." "Don't mess that up." "Not a chance," Dexter promised. "Some mistakes you only make once in a lifetime." That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the family sat together on the back porch of their home. Maya leaned against Dexter's side, pointing out constellations beginning to appear, while Micah sprawled on the steps, working on designs for additions to the treehouse. Imani watched them from the doorway, her heart full almost to bursting. When Dexter looked up and caught her gaze, the love in his eyes stole her breath, still, after all these months. Later, after the twins were asleep, they sat together on the porch swing, the rhythm of their gentle rocking matching the beating of their hearts. "I was thinking," Dexter said casually, though Imani felt the subtle tension in his body that belied the tone. "That gazebo would make a perfect spot for a wedding. Small, intimate, just family and close friends." Her heart leapt as she turned to face him. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Caldwell?" "More of a preview," he smiled, reaching into his pocket. "The actual proposal involves this." The ring he held captured the last rays of twilight, simple yet elegant in its vintage setting. Imani recognized it immediately, his grandmother's ring, the one he'd promised would one day be hers before life had torn them apart. "You kept it," she whispered. "All these years." "Some promises are meant to be kept," he said softly, taking her hand. "Even if they take a detour of 15 years and 2 amazing children." As he slipped the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit, as if time had merely paused rather than passed, Dexter spoke the words she'd once thought she'd never hear again. "I promise to love you completely, to be the father our children deserve, and to never again mistake success for what truly matters. Marry me, Imani." Let's finish the story we started. The yes that fell from her lips was both an ending and a beginning, the closing of a circle that had begun in a small-town garden with two teenagers dreaming of the future, and the opening of a new chapter written with the wisdom that only time and forgiveness could bring. Their kiss sealed more than an engagement. It affirmed that sometimes the longest journeys lead back to where we belong, that sometimes it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. And that love, when genuine, has the patience to wait for hearts to find their way home. Your royal presence in our story kingdom makes these journeys possible. If this tale of rediscovered love touched your heart, press that like button to help others find it too. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Tomorrow's story explores another heart-stopping reunion you won't want to miss.